Yeah. Okay. Okay. This is coming together. Cool. 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 Optima is mountain. Absolutely, it is. Oh. Yes. Let's say the mountain is fragrant. So, Google Sheets is usually how I start with these conlangs. I just like being able to make charts. I find charts are great in conlanging because you're going to want vowel charts, you're going to want consonant charts, you're going to want verb paradigms, noun paradigms, all this sort of good stuff. So I love just booting up a spreadsheet. And so, we're going to have fun with spreadsheets today. So the idea behind this conlang segment, which we are now starting, the conlang segment, welcome, is that we're going to actually build a conlang from the ground up live. And I was thinking that we could sort of keep the same language going over a number of weeks. And hopefully we can sort of build it together and have a bit of a conlang party to which you're all invited. So with that in mind, if you have suggestions or thoughts or inspiration for things to put in, decisions we have to make, I am all ears. Just put it in the chat and I will weave it in to this conlang, and we'll collaborate on it and have something that we can sort of all share. So to start off with, in any conlang project, I like to put in a bit of inspiration. And I always like to take inspiration from natural languages because, well, they're cool. Natural languages are very cool, and I like to make generally naturalistic conlangs. So having that one foot in the real world with existing natural languages helps to make things naturalistic and give you a nice sort of anchor point. So with that in mind, I'm pondering what kind of language we might want to make here. Because I have made on screen a few different languages. I've done, I think this back in the depths of this of my YouTube channel. There is a recording of an old Conlang with me event, which is sort of in the same spirit as this. But I'd like to try something new. So I'm seeing some requests for Yiddish inspiration. So let's put down, where is the zoom thingy on this? You get to enjoy me not knowing where various things are. So hopefully this is a bit easier for everyone to see. So let's talk about inspiration. And we have a request for some Yiddish inspiration from the chat. Interesting. What types of Yiddish inspiration, I wonder? Well, we can take inspiration from the Yiddish sound system. So I'm thinking maybe some uvular fricatives. That would be fun to have in this. Some ch or r action going. So with that in mind, I'm going to get some IPA up here. Let's get some things copied and pasted so I'm not always going over to, we want some uvulars. Uvular fricatives and maybe uvular trill as well. Put that in as well. Trill, that's a good start. Okay, what else might we be able to put in here? I have had this idea of making a fairly isolating conlang, sort of kicking around in my head for a few years now. I think my usual tendency when making conlangs is to make something very inflected with a lot of nice verb charts and things, but it might be cool to make a relatively analytic language, which is something a little more, which works a little bit more grammatically like English, where each word is just its own thing, and you don't really inflect things. You don't change nouns for plural. You don't change verbs for past tense or for what the subject is. So you don't have these sort of Spanish-like or Latin-like charts where you have your first person, your second person, your third person, your singular, your plural. You know, you don't have these kinds of charts like we have for Latin. You just have one word plopped after another and with not a lot of messing about with them. But what you do have in these languages is typically a lot of strictness of word order. And so that's where you get to exercise a bit of creativity and a bit of and you get to infuse the language with some cool stuff. You can make word order change if it's a negative sentence or things like that. So that, I think, would be bucking the trend in conlanging, to make a heavily analytic language with a strict word order. So none of these charts. We may have a few charts, but I'm seeing Lucy in the chat is asking which are the uvular fricatives. So a uvular fricative is so let's break that down to two parts. Uvular, it means that the sound is made by contact or near contact of the back of the tongue against the uvula. And if you're curious about what the uvula is, I'm not going to demonstrate it to you, but if you've ever seen in those old cartoons when someone screams and you can see that little dangly bit of flesh at the back of their throat, that is the uvula. So when we have a uvular sound, we have, I'll see if the mic will pick it up, but something like ha or ha, where the back of the tongue is making contact with that part of our anatomy. And the uvular fricative is a sound that's made when you narrow airflow. So any fricative is a sound made by narrowing airflow such that a high frequency noise is produced. So in the case of a labial fricative, it would be something like v. In the case of an alveolar fricative, that would be the tip of the tongue against the alveolar ridge, making something like s. So you hear that high frequency noise. And then a uvular fricative is something like so this is something that I think lots of people think of when they think of Yiddish, because Yiddish has this, and so we can bring some of that lovely sound into this language. So I'm going to, after all those fricatives, I'm going to take a glass of water to recover. We also have uvular stops like this is the Q sound that you see in the name of the country Iraq, which would be pronounced not like a k as we do in English, but with a k. So yeah, we could have some uvular stuff. We could have we could be more analytic. We could have a fairly strict word order. And in terms of the sound system, so we have uvulars. Let's think about something to do with the vowels that we could do to spice this up. We could have a kind of a, I don't want to make it too gimmicky, but maybe we could have a very small vowel inventory language. So maybe something like 3 vowels, the probably the E, A, U vowels. And then what we'd see is when next to the uvular sounds, what often happens when you have vowels next to uvular sounds is that they get affected. So instead of having A, if you have a uvular next to it, sometimes it'll be pulled back because all that action is happening in the back of the mouth with the ka or the ha. And so it's hard to make a front sound right next to that back sound. And so you, instead of having something like ak, you have something like alk. So we could have fun with that kind of thing. And I'm seeing a request for vowel harmony. Yep, let's put in some vowel harmony. We may need to have more than 3 vowels if we're going to do that, but well, maybe not. So that'll be fun to put in. Is that the same thing as ATR? ATR is it stands for advanced tongue root. So this is this is a distinction that's made when the very back of the tongue is placed forward or back. It's a kind of thing that occurs a lot in languages in sub-Saharan Africa. I believe we have actually vowel harmony involving ATR. Is the pulling back the same as ATR? It's not exactly the same as ATR because it's the in this case it's, at least I don't believe it is the same as ATR. I think it's just the vowel moving a bit farther to the back within the vowel space. So not with respect to the tongue root itself. But I don't think I have all the articulatory phonetics to be able to speak with supreme intelligence on that question, but that's a good one. So we have, yes, uvular fricatives, an analytic language with strict word order, maybe a minimalistic vowel system. We could say minimalistic vowel system, and such as ya-oo, and some vowel harmony. That would be cool. Yeah, so I think what we would analyze the effect of the uvular on say a low central vowel like ah would just be a sort of co-articulation effect of that backing of the tongue. It would be a backing of the tongue body rather than the tongue root. I think that's probably how I would analyze that. Okay, let's get some charts going here. Let's see what we've got. So we need a consonant chart, consonants, and we need a vowel chart. Let's just make a first pass at this, and then we'll start to make some words and see what we think of it. So let's take a look at nasal, let's take a look at stops, fricatives. What else will we need? We'll get some approximants. We can get some, I don't know if we want affricates. Do we want affricates? Let's put it in. And let's look at labial, coronal, palatal, velar, uvular, maybe glottal. We might need a huh. All right, so let's do the usual suspects. When you're starting any project, you're probably going to have these three, not 100% of the time, but probably. And I'd like to put in a m and a n. Let's also we could break up approximate into more finer grained distinctions, but we can do that later to see if we actually want to. We committed to uvulars here, so let's give ourselves a k at least and a ch. And so let's get some fricatives going. Maybe a f, a s. Yeah. Some basic. Let's just semi-vowel, and then let's talk about. Okay, put in a l and a r of some kind. Although we may want. Well, let's put in a l to begin with, and let's see how far that takes us. Okay, so we have a very basic constant inventory here. I have not put in distinctive voicing yet. That may or may not be something we want, but let's continue with some vowels just to flesh this out a bit. So front, central, back, high, mid, and low. So we at least want I, A, U. We at least want I, A, U. We may also, depends on what kind of vowel harmony we're going to want. If we're going to want, well, let's let's put a pin in that for now. And let's make a few words and start to see what this language is going to look like. And then we can decide what we might want in terms of vowel harmony. Okay, so we are going to find syllable structure. And we are going to have, so it would be very rare, maybe even unheard of, not to have CV as an option. So we're going to build from there. If this is going to be a language in which morphemes more or less stand on their own, then we're probably going to have to make a decision between very long words or more complicated syllable structures. So I think that we at least want to have an optional coda consonant, and we might want to allow something like S here. This is just a potential syllable structure that just popped out of my head unbidden, but let's see what it would give us. So it would give us something like, we'd have things like ma, si, wan. Let's use some of our fach. And I'm going to Romanize this with X, so I'm not always copying and pasting things. Ma, si, wan, fach. And notice I'm putting in a bit of that allophonic backing, fach, rather than fach. I'm putting in a bit of that allophonic backing just for a bit of fun. So we have ma, si, wan, fach, something like slew would work because we have this optional S before before that onset consonant. We might have something like, oops, the webcam is blocking some of the text. Indeed it is. Let us move over with the text. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Thank you for that heads up, Lucy. I'm going to use my multitasking skills, which are top notch, as everyone who knows me knows, to get that looking nice. So what do we have here? We have ma, si, wan, fach, slew. Let's make some polysyllabic words. Something like mistak. That's kind of cool. I like that. Mistak. Mistak. Do we want to allow vowel initial syllables? I think it could be fun to have something like anaku as a potential word. So we can put some parentheses around this C to say that, the maximal syllable in this language is going to be something like stak, but we could also have something as simple as a, and really anything in between. Okay, so mistak, anaku. I kind of like that. Let's get some more of that good uvular fricative in here. Hutfi. Yeah, hutfi. That works. I think that works. Hutfi. Mistak anaku hutfi. So it's sometimes fun to just make up nonsense sentences to get a sense of what the vibe of this language is. Let us continue. We have a question in the chat from Lucy here. These words almost sound kind of rounded. They are, well, if you look at something like anaku, that u is going to be rounded. Hutfi, The oo here is going to be rounded, and I'm even dropping that oo down a little bit to closer to o. The nice thing about having a 3-vowel system is that there's a lot of latitude as to how you pronounce those 3 vowels, because there's not really a chance of them being confused with each other unless you go really far from the sort of epicenter of where that vowel should be. So you could have this vowel phoneme oo, so a distinctive sound oo, that could be pronounced more like o sometimes, because you don't have a different o that you might confuse it with. So you could have something like mistak anako hotfi, but really underlyingly that's hutfi. So these are potential things that could be fun to play with. But yeah, there is a sort of rounded quality to that. What we could do on that note is have kind of rounding harmony. And so in that sense, we could have something like, instead of hutfi, we would carry the rounding of that oo forward to the rest of the vowels in that word. So instead of something like hutfi, we would have something like hutfi. And we'd get that nice front rounded vowel that you see in French and German, ü, which, if you've ever been curious how to pronounce that sound, you make e and then round your lips. So e, hutfi. So in vowel harmony, what we see is the features of one vowel sort of carry across to other vowels in the word. And this sometimes goes from left to right. It sometimes goes from right to left. There are all sorts of complications that happen with it. In this case, I'm imagining that it would be something that went from left to right, just so that we can make it work with this hutfi word. So instead of hutfi, we would actually have something like hutfi. And yeah, that's kind of nice. I like that. Hutfi. I wonder what that would mean. If you have any inspiration for what any of these nonsense words that I've made over in column L, if you have any ideas for what they might mean, let me know. Let us continue. Okay. I'll just put the little meanings here if anyone has any inspiration. Okay. So then the question is, could we get away with just this, or do we want to add more? We notice we don't have any voiced series of consonants here, or of obstruents here. That is stops and fricatives. So, pa, we don't have any ba. We have ta, we don't have any da. We have ka, we have ka, we don't have any ga, and we have ka, and we don't have any ga. Although that one's admittedly pretty rare. And we have fa without v, we have s without z, and we have ch without r. And that might be totally fine. Maybe we don't need any voiced equivalents. I mean, I think this is a fine inventory on its own. How many consonants do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And 1, 2, 3. So 12 consonants and 3 vowels. That's a fairly small inventory as far as inventories go, both for consonants and vowels. The question about the naturalist, so is it naturalistic, if I'm interpreting this question correctly, is it naturalistic to have no voicing contrast in obstruents, so in stops and fricatives? And it actually is naturalistic. You do find languages that just have one series of stops, and sometimes they're voiced in certain contexts, but that difference between voiced and voiceless never makes any difference in meaning. So it's what we call allophonic instead of phonemic. It's not contrastive. So as an example, we might have a word like, let's take ata. And so when we're talking about, I don't know what everyone's background is who's going to be watching this, you know, both now and in the future. But without going into a big explanation of it, essentially there are two levels to a language's sound system. There's the level of what we might call the mental representation of the sounds, which we call the phonemic level. And then there's the level of the sounds themselves as they're spoken, and that's the phonetic level. And so we usually write these differently. I'll put this over here. So phonemic, phonetic. We might have something like ata, and we write the phonemes in these slashes. So these are what is stored in the speaker's memory. And then the phonetic representation is what the speaker actually ends up saying. And so you might have a language. Well, let's take English as an example. So English, we have a word T, spelled like this. And in an English speaker's mental representation of the word T, we have a voiceless alveolar stop, or coronal. Coronal, by the way. Sorry, I'm going off on all sorts of tangents. Coronal is a sort of stand-in for alveolar or dental. So let's just say alveolar for the sake of keeping things simple. So phonemic representation would have a voiceless alveolar stop, which is t, and a high front unrounded vowel e. So those two things in that order give you the word t. T, e, t. But what English speakers actually say is... Oh, hi, Alethea. Okay, yep, I'll get to that question soon. What English speakers actually say is something more like, let me see if I can get my little IPA symbols out here, is something like this. Oops, that's, well, okay. That T is a bit curved for the actual IPA symbol, but whatever. And so you get this puff of air. And if you've ever taken a linguistics class, this is probably the example they use to talk about this distinction. This puff of air occurs when a T, the T sound, is stressed and at the start of a syllable. So at the start of a stressed syllable, like in T. And so that puff of air is not stored in the mental representation of this word T because it's fully predictable from where that sound occurs in the word. So to bring this back to the question of what might be going on in a case where we have an exclusively voiceless series of stops, say. So we might have the phonemic representation of ata, but phonetically, you might have something like ada, where the voicing on the vowels that surround this sound sort of cause the sound that appears between them also to become voiced. And so this is something that will happen that will happen from time to time. It's phonetically natural because the voicing of the vocal folds that start with ah, they like to keep going because there's another voice segment coming later, the second vowel. So ata, you might get something like that voicing persisting all the way through and getting ada. Sorry, I have got the wrong brackets there. This is exactly, as Alethea points out, this is exactly what happened with the Old English fricative system. So if you have let me think of a good word. So if you have a word like doozy, which we will see later on today, doozy, which means foolish, that would be represented phonemically like this, but phonetically it comes out like this. Oops, that's not an I, that's an A. So doozy. Because there's no distinction made between, there's no possible way for voiced versus voiceless fricatives to give you a different meaning in Old English. It's purely predictable from where the fricative occurs in the word. And yes, I'm here for a good time. You are totally correct that this is where the alternations in English plurals like wife, wives come from. And Alethea points out that it is natural to have voiceless and no voiced. It's natural to have voiceless obstruents only but no voiced on an underlying level. It's not so natural to have voiced only and no voiceless. There's a sort of tendency for obstruents to be by default voiceless, and for sonorants, the non-obstruents, to be by default voiced. So yeah, that can happen. Okay, so lots of little forking paths, but basically what we could do is we could have this allophonic voicing. So that's what's going on here. Just like here we have allophonic aspiration. Aspiration is the name given to that puff of air that comes after the stop in T, which is, by the way, why I have this pop filter. It's a little feature of English that's not the best friend of any audio engineer. So we could have allophonic voicing in the obstruents in this language as well. So in that case, we would have this word mistak anaku khutfi would come out. So that would be before our innovations. So this is its phonemic representation. And then it would come out something like, I need my IPA keyboard. Excuse me 1 second. Mistalk. Anna. And then we need to find the voiced uvular stop. Anako. Anako. Fun. Khutfi. Oops. I always get that wrong. Mistak anago khutfi. Yeah, I don't mind that. It might take me some time to learn how to put all those sounds together in a natural way, but you know, this is where practice makes progress. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at what we've done. We've got a consonant inventory. We've got a vowel inventory. Both are fairly minimalistic, but we've started to create some patterns of allophony. And we have talked about vowel harmony, so spreading of rounding rightwards from U to E, giving us this U. And so this is purely allophonic vowel harmony at this point. So we would have something, let's write down some rules in a sort of informal way. So we have rule 1, which is rounding harmony. We have, and I'm running out of space on the screen. Let's see if I can find some real estate up here. Rounding harmony, and let's say that would be something like E rather becomes E when after ooh. If you've never seen these phonological rules before, basically the way to read them is this thing on the left of the greater than symbol. It should be an arrow really. Becomes this thing, the thing on the right side of this arrow, and this occurs only in the environment that is defined after the slash. So let's rewrite this in sort of plain English. E becomes E after U with intervening material. That's what this ... stands for. So whenever you have an U in a word, if you have an E after it, at any point in the word, that E is going to become E. Okay, that's our rounding harmony. Second allophonic rule is we have backing of a adjacent to uvular. Great. Sorry, I'm going to write this here. We won't worry about formalizing these too much because I don't want to have to go on another another tangent before we get all this written down. Backing of a adjacent to uvulars, great. And the third thing is voicing, so intervocalic voicing of obstruents. So let's just try and keep the jargon a little bit less than we've had it so far. Intervocalic voicing of stops and fricatives. Great. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And that we see all three of them in this example sentence here. So I was looking at the chat, and I think that Lucy, you put in a comment that khutfi sounds like a verb. Well, let's make it a verb. So if khutfi is a verb, maybe this is a little simple sentence. Mistak anaqu khutfi. You can go back and critique these uvulars if you have some free time later. I certainly will. So if we have the verb at the end, this is telling me that if we say that this is a simple sentence with a subject and an object, then we might have an SOV word order. Someone khutfis someone or something. So what's it going to mean? Anyone in the chat have a nice, friendly, positive, loving verb that we can use that is not violent because there's always the tendency to use violent verbs when you're talking about simple transitive sentences. We can talk about why that is at some point if you'd like, but let's, we could have something like hug. That's a positive, a nice, friendly thing. We don't always have to be talking about bopping each other on the heads like we're, or besieging cities like we're studying an ancient language. So yeah, maybe we could say khutfi is, I'm seeing a suggestion to run. Okay, so if khutfi is to run, then we will not be able to have an object in this sentence. So let's put this question of the basic word order on hold, but let's make khutfi run. And let's, I'm seeing to help as well. Okay, well, we'll put maybe something else in here as to help. We'll put that in a moment. So we have this sentence here, mistak anaku khutfi, which means something run. It is true that sometimes in some languages you will have the ability to have, for verbs of motion, to have a direct object. The one that springs to mind is Sanskrit. I don't know if anyone's Sanskrit is less rusty than mine. I'm pretty sure everyone who's ever studied it for more than a day's Sanskrit is less rusty than mine. But I remember that the verb to go, which I believe is something like gacchati, will allow a direct object. So you could say something like vanang gacchati, so goes to the forest goes, but literally it's just forest goes. So maybe we have a situation like that, in which case then we can have a direct object here. Okay, so then maybe we have something like mistak could be something like, I'm just going to put in an example here, and maybe mistak is friend, because we're keeping it friendly. We're having a nice friendly atmosphere here, so why not have our first noun be friend? So the friend runs to anaku. Anaku is what? It could be a location. I think let's make anaku some kind of a location. So what kind of a location would this friend be running to? The well. Okay. Thank you. The well. Okay, so friend, well, run. So then we do have an SOV language here. And we need a word for park as well. Okay, so we have our first sentence in this language. And how long have we been doing this for? 40 minutes, maybe? I mean, granted, I have been going on all sorts of tangents. But that's pretty good. 40 minutes in, we have our first sentence. And it's I like the sound of this language so far. Mistak anaku khutfi. And it is using our inspiration. We have our uvular fricatives, which we see in khutfi. We have an analytic language. We don't have a lot going on within the words themselves. We have a strict word order. Well, I mean, you'll have to take my word for it so far. We've only got one sentence. And we have a minimalistic vowel system with vowel harmony. That's kind of cool. Okay, so I think what we need to do is start developing this a little bit more. So I need to clean up my workspace a bit here. Let's see, what are we going to do? Well, let's take away our inspiration. No, never take away my inspiration. But sadly, yes, we will be doing that. We can take away this explanation here. I'm going to put it over sheet 2. Apologies for the swapping. Okay, and then we can get rid of this glottal column here, so we don't need it. And then let's take our phonological inventory and put it up here. Well, yeah, there we go. That's nice. That's nice. That's just nice. And then our syllable structure can go here, and will it? Yeah, it fits over the webcam. Cool. Finally, we have our phonological rules, which we can put here. Don't need to count our inventory. Good. Okay, so we've got our phonology over here. We might put some grammatical stuff about here. We have an SOV order. And we have our first sentences. Okay, let's put our lexicon here. Can increase this just a little bit. There we go. We have our lexicon here, and we have our example sentences right here. And so hopefully this will do us for a while. Good evening. Good evening, Larai Fox. Am I saying that correctly? Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We've been working on a language collaboratively, so please feel free to jump in with any suggestions. We have some words that have no meanings, and we have some meanings that have no words. So this language is shaping up, but we are going to need some help populating it, because we can talk a lot about friends running to wells. We can talk about friends running in general, but that's about it. Super. So what else can we do? Let's give ourselves some more words here. I'm going to just generate some strings of sounds that work with our consonant structure. Our syllable structure. So we have something like aptuma. We could have something like sufti. So written S-U-F-T-I, but pronounced sufti, because of our vowel harmony rule that we made, our rule 1. We could have something like yustaku. We could have something like spata. Yeah, those work. Those all work with our syllable structure. One thing that we have not discussed yet is how to how to avoid situations where we have awkward combinations of consonants or vowels. So I've been avoiding these combinations in the words I've made so far, but we won't be able to avoid them forever. So we may have some what are called phonotactic constraints. So constraints on what sounds can phono, sounds, tact, touch each other. And so that will come naturally. Souftalia. Souftalia. Yeah, this has got to be some kind of food. Some kind of a special dish. Have you tried the souftalia? It's excellent. Okay, so souftalia yustaku. I feel like we might want to achieve some matches between these meaningless words and these wordless meanings. Let's put in help. Let's make help sutfi. And let's make park something like spata. Now, one interesting thing about a word like park, if you think about a word, if you think about a park, what is a park today? You know, it's a sort of public place where people can go and there's green space, benches, things like that. But you know, this idea of a public park is relatively recent, and the meaning of park has evolved from something that wasn't, you know, kept up by a city government. It would have been a very different sort of swath of land that might not have been open to the public. So we might think of how this spata word might have evolved to come to mean a public place where people can go and sit on the swings and, you know, play checkers. What else do people do in parks? This kind of thing. So that's something to think about. Let's see what else we have. Yeah, so I think that this souftalia is definitely something that's been slow cooked. Some kind of stew. So kind of stew. Lucy, is there a specific dish that you're subconsciously bringing to mind? And can anyone else tell that I'm hungry? Because I'm now dwelling on this. I don't even know what this dish is. Lucy, what is this? Chef Talia? Is that how you say it? Drop that in the chat, but don't make it sound too appetizing, because, you know, I've got another hour to go on this stream before I can eat anything. Okay, so good. Let's make some more decisions about this Conlang. So we have an SOV language, and because we have an SOV language, there are some correlations with other kinds of word order that show up when you have SOV languages. And one of these is the preposition postposition distinction. So we have in English, we have prepositions for the most part. So we say things like in the park, to the well, on the hill. So we have these words like in and to and on, which tell us more specifically what the relationship of the noun that follows them, or the noun phrase that follows them, to the rest of the sentence. What is this relationship for the rest of the sentence, with the rest of the sentence? So you have something like I do not know all of the shortcuts on a Windows machine. I ran in the park. I ran to the well. I ran on the hill. So this is telling us what is the relationship of the park to the rest of the sentence. And it's a location in the case of I ran in the park. It's a destination in the case of I ran to the well. And it's a slightly different kind of location. In the case of I ran on the hill, it's a sort of a location that you're on the surface of. So these are called prepositions, in, to, and on, because they are before, position. They're positioned before the noun. But in other languages, especially SOV languages, you see postpositions. So you would have the equivalent of I ran the park in, if you had a sort of a postposition version of English. Now, when I say English is mostly prepositional, it's I'm emphasizing mostly because it's maybe 99.9% of cases, but there are some instances where you have postpositions in English. So you could say something like, your objections notwithstanding. Hopefully you don't get this said to you a lot, but here we have a postposition in English. Not super common, not something that we would really call typical of English, but it does happen. You can also have, as Alethea points out, you can have circumpositions where you have basically a little bit of each. So it might be something like, well, we don't have a good example, but maybe we can, let's make a circumposition for this language because I think it's fun. So let's see, I want to say, I ran in the park, or my friend, or the friend runs, let's give us a proper literal translation here. So the friend runs to the well. Something like that. Oops, don't need both of those. The friend runs to the well. Actually, I did need both of those because, yeah. The friend runs to the well. What if the friend runs in the park? What are we going to do here? And I am once again running out of space. Let's adjust some columns. There we go. Okay, so let's get rid of these things. The friend runs in the park. So what are we going to need? I'm not going to bother with the phonetic details in this case, but we are going to need something like mistak, something here, and hutfi. And that something is going to be spata, but we need so we have something like friend, park, run. And we need something to go after this because this is going to be a postpositional language, although I think we're going to have some circumpositions as well. So let's first make a postposition and then branch out into some circumpositions. So we need something like in to go here. So how are we going to do this? Well, often you will find, not always, but often you will find that prepositions are fairly small, light phonologically. And so we have some monosyllables up here that we can take advantage of. So we could say something like mistak spata ma hutfi. And that could mean the friend runs in the park. Mistak spata ma hutfi. And that would work pretty nicely. So let's assume that we'll stick with ma for in. And we have this beautiful postpositional phrase here. I'm just putting these brackets there to show you sort of where the phrase boundary is. Spata ma, in park. I'm not worrying about things like the or a in this language yet. We may well get to those determiners, as they're called, or articles in sort of more traditional analyses. But let's not worry about those for now. I'm going to look at the chat again because I have been on a roll with this postposition. So I'm Here for a Good Time mentions that we have something that looks like morphology here. So we have two verbs, sufti and hutfi, that both end in fi. Now, this is inspired as a sort of as an isolating language. So ideally, to be pure and totally isolating, we wouldn't want to have a lot of internal, so yeah, we could. So what we could do is we could have this be some sort of a type of verb. So we could have a okay. Inspiration is coming to me. Inspiration is coming to me. Maybe historically, this is something like fee is something like a verb like give. And goed is something like leg. So originally you would have something like he gave a leg, meaning he ran. And then sutfi could be something like, this might sound too much like an English calc, an English, very influenced by English, but we could have something like hand, like give a hand. And I'm okay with that because I think it's pretty cool. So historically, giving a leg would be to run, giving a hand would be helping. And now we have these sort of verbs that show their history. Hutfi, sutfi. So you might have lots of verbs that have this fi suffix on them because they originated in times past as combinations like give a hand, have a nap, things like this. These are called, by the way, light verb constructions, where you have the verb, the actual verb give, have, take, get. In English, those would be some of the verbs used in these constructions. These would be not contributing a lot semantically. So in have a nap, all the action, all the meaning is coming from nap, from the noun. Have is just there to, make it into a verb phrase. And so these light verb constructions might become fossilized and turn into verbs of their own. So I think that's very much in keeping with what's going on without having we're not inflecting, we're not doing anything like that. We're just showing that, these words have histories. And so then this actually might give us some more words. So we might have leg and hand, goed and soet. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. This is coming together. This is coming together really nicely. I think let's do a little bit more, and then let's look at some Old English, because I feel like we're on a bit of a roll here. But I also want to make sure that we get enough time to do everything. So, do we have any ideas as to what our words aptuma and justaku might mean? Because they're nice 3-syllable words. They feel like they should have some nice, some nice meaning. Yes. Okay. So I set that as a challenge to you, chat. Come up with meanings for aptuma and justaku. But while you do that, I'm going to follow up a lead that Alethea has brought up. So we can, once we know that we have these light verb constructions as options, and we like to use give with these parts of the body to mean different things, well, why don't we just keep going? So maybe we have a word I, one, and maybe we have ear, slew, and we have something like wanfi, which means to look, and sleufi, which means to hear, or to listen, rather. Although, I guess it would be pronounced sleuvi, because we have allophonic voicing of fricatives in between vowels, just like Old English. Cool. Aptuma is mountain. Absolutely it is. Okay. So, let us, let's make a sentence like mistak aptuma wanfi. So this is friend, mountain, look. The friend looks at the mountain. Cool. Yustaku, yeah. Let's make yustaku into some kind of adjective. Adjectives are kind of interesting because they're sort of in a sense, they're a little bit more of a gray area than nouns or verbs, because they tend to align themselves with either one or the other. So a language will typically have more nouny, and yes, that is the technical term, nouny adjectives, or more verby adjectives. And so we have the option to choose whether we want our adjectives to be more like verbs. So in that case, you would have something like, imagine you have an adjective like tall in English. You would have, in a language with verby adjectives, you would have a verb meaning more or less be tall. So you could say he talls to mean he is tall. So we could do something like that, and that's always fun. Why don't we do that? We can have verby adjectives, and we can take a look and see what are we going to make yustaku into? What's that going to mean? I think we could do something like, I feel like it's a bit long for something basic like good. Yes, having a smell. Okay. So yustaku would mean something like fragrant, to put a positive spin on it. So let's make a new sentence. Let's get everything in order here. I know I'm an absolutely chaotic Excel user. It's not even Excel either, it's Google Docs. Okay, so let's say the mountain is fragrant. So let's just build this up bit by bit. We have SOV, so we have mountain fragrant. We don't need any linking verb because fragrant is itself a verb. It's a stative verb, a verb that expresses a kind of an adjectival meaning. The mountain is fragrant. Boom. Okay, and so then let's just fill in the blanks. So we have aptuma, yustaku. That's actually quite simple. Now, let's find where things get complicated. What if we want to use so there are two ways of using an adjective in English. So you have the predicative adjectives, like the mountain is fragrant. Don't ask me why. It's, you can smell it from here. They must be, I don't know, burning something on the mountain, with a lot of flowers or something. Who knows what's going on? And then you have attributive adjectives, like the fragrant mountain ... is over there. Oh, sorry, it's going a little bit off screen, but I think you see what I mean. So this use of the adjective within the noun phrase is what becomes a little bit more complicated when we have verby adjectives, at least from our perspective as English speakers. So what we have here, we have this sentence over here, the friend looks at the mountain. What if we want to say the friend looks at the fragrant mountain? How are we going to do that? We have to sort of make it into a relative clause. The friend looks at the mountain which is fragrant. Okay. So how are we going to do that? Well, we might have something like this. Let's make it look a little bit like this. So we have, what was it, yustaku? And then we need something to mark that this is a relative clause. This is just one way of doing it, but it's the way that sort of popped into my mind. So let's walk down this road a bit. So we need some marker that says that, hey, this yustaku is its own clause off on its own modifying mountain, modifying aptuma. So we need some kind of a particle here, something like you would use, if you speak Mandarin, there's a particle de that would be used in this context. So we can, okay, yes, C does not have a meaning. Let's conscript it. We have a relative particle. Thank you for the suggestion. Okay, so yustaku si aptuma. Mistak yustaku si aptuma wan fi. Yeah. Gotta make sure I apply all my phonological rules. This is cool. Mistak yustaku si aptuma wan fi. Oh, I guess it should be yustagu if we are voicing intervocalically. All right, so then, cool. The friend looks at the fragrant mountain. Cool. And we can use this C for any kind of relative clause. So, let's say something like No, okay, we're not quite ready for that yet. Let's just make a person's name. Well, let's make a person's name. Let's just use Lucy, because Lucy, you're so kind as to help produce this whole experience. The least I can do is make you star in one of these sentences. So the sentence that we're aiming for is Lucy looks at the friend who runs to the well. And yeah, this is probably the most complicated that we are going to get on this in this episode. But let's see how we were going to do this. So we'll have Lucy, and then we have this big sentence, which is going to be something like friend, well run, relative. And then look. Except we need to take the friend out of the clause and put it into the main clause. Okay. Lucy well-run relative friend. Look. So SOV, it takes some getting used to. But I gotta get some more space for this. Okay. So now we just have to plop in the words. So we have Lucy, what was well, anaku, run, hutfi, si, mistak, wanfi. Lucy, anaku, hutfi, si, mistak, wanfi. That's pretty cool. I kind of dig it. Now, one question is vowel harmony. Okay, let's just think about vowel harmony a little bit. Vowel harmony proceeds until it spreads. It's a spreading of a feature of one vowel across this domain. So we have hutfi. Sorry, it should be written like this. Hutfi underlyingly going to hutfi. So we have this rounding of the U spreading onto the E. But it stops at the word boundary. However, when we have this little C afterwards, we have the potential to consider this C as kind of within the domain of this khutfi word. And if we consider it within the domain of applying this vowel harmony rule, then we would not have khutfu si, we would have khutfu su. And now the C is starting to look a lot more like an affix, which is somewhat against the spirit of our heavily analytic language, but whatever. I think we should always be governed by the rule of what is coolest at the time. So that's an open question, whether we want to consider this C as a wholly separate word or as something that's going to be enveloped into the domain of the verb that is right before it, because there will always be a verb right before it. This is one of the things about SOV languages. When you have a relative particle, it's always going to be right after the verb in that relative clause. So, I've heard some people actually argue that this is where suffixation comes from a lot of the time. So anyway, tangent, not talking about that. So that's got some potential. Okay, so Lucy anaku hutfi si mistakwanfi. That's pretty cool. What is our time like? I think let us put it aside there. We've done a lot of good work on this language. We need a name. So if anyone comes up with inspiration for a name, I missed one thing. Fach could be eat. That has to go in there. If anyone comes up with the idea for a name as we go on, just drop it in the chat. I think that would be a lot of fun. But for now, it is the untitled December 7th, 2021 stream language that we will continue next week. And if for those of you who are in the future viewing this on YouTube, if you enjoy this sort of thing, I would encourage you to subscribe. It would be awesome, and you'll be able to see how this all develops. And if you are someone who does Discord, we also have a Discord. The link will be somewhere. I don't know where it will be yet, but you'll find it. You'll use your research skills and find it, and join us where we'll talk about all this sort of stuff.